So, we're looking now, we'll start off with government format. Revelation chapter 12, verse 5. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. Now, the most likely government formats that we have that are applicable to most nations today, including China, Russia, Europe, and even the United States, is plutocracy, which is the rule of the wealthy, or oligarchy, the rule of the few. A group of wealthy elite individuals and political party leaders have such influence that they can actually rule over the governments of the United States and the various nations operating as a shadow government. Usually, wealthy elite individuals are from dynastic families or royalty. They operate well behind the scenes, and their influence is derived from their great wealth. Now, citing Jim Marrs, Douglas Woodward states, political power is generational, powerful families from dynasties with bloodlines or genealogies traced for centuries, be they royal or not, which share goals that comprise family legacies. These plans take decades, if not centuries, to be implemented. This generational power is connected to ideologies transcending the mere issue of making money that these various families hold to be true. Their beliefs drive political actions for generation after generation. You don't normally see these people because they're acting in the background, but they have money and they have influence. And they're not part of your elected government, but they can influence government to act to their bidding. Now, again, citing Jim Marrs, Woodward states, in essence, the elite's personal agendas transcend national states and apparently outdated national sentiments. So they're global people. They don't necessarily consider themselves actual citizens of the nations in which they live. They're global citizens. Because of their wealth and because of their power, they pretty much have the world at their beck and call. Now, these elite are able to shelter their wealth by the establishment of tax-exempt foundations, Ford Foundation, Carnegie Foundation, a few others. These foundations work to promote the type of world that they wish to forge, beneficial to their worldview and the maintenance of their power and control. You got enough money? Power is at your beck and call. Woodward again cites Jim Marrs' conclusions, where he says, these globalists who have manipulated world history for decades, if not centuries, are working a plan to turn the once free and prosperous republic of the United States into a socialist state populated by dumbed down and destitute zombies by draining dry the nation's money supply. And the money that's in your pocket today is really not worth anything because it's backed by debt. It's only, the value only is represented only by the fact that you have faith in it. If you lose faith in your money, it'll be worth nothing. That is, if our nation and the world loses faith in our money, which could very well happen, we would then it would then lose its power. And also, don't forget that the Federal Reserve creates money out of nothing. Therefore, the money really is worth zero in the long term. It should be obvious that the wealthy indirectly rule the masses through pre-approved candidates. So when you go to vote for a candidate of your choice, is it really your choice? The wealthy greatly influence, if not outright control, both the Republican and Democratic parties. Consider that when you go to vote next time, that the wealthy greatly influence and outright control both of these parties. It is the party bosses and oligarchy of both parties acting in collusion that wield sufficient political power to control candidates and legislation that supports the monopoly capitalism of the elite at the expense of the people. So party bosses which is an oligarchy, which means rule by the few. The party bosses of the various parties, we have Republican, Democrat, they are in collusion and they can control the candidates and legislation because they're the ones that distribute the money that is given to them by various special interest groups, including the wealthy. And so therefore they support what is called monopoly capitalism, because monopoly means that they have gained control pretty much of whatever products or that they are involved in over the expense of smaller, less fortunate companies. So you have pictured there as a guy by the name of Boss Tweed, and he controlled the party, the Democratic Party at the time of his power at Tammany Hall in New York City. And here is also a picture depicted of, they're all pointing the blame. Who's responsible? Who spent your money? And they're all pointing to Boss Tweed. So the few, the oligarchy, the few control. According to Woodward, in the final analysis, politicians can only advance their careers within the party. They can't change what happens to our country. The opportunity to make a difference rests with non-elected power players. And there's just a couple of them that I've depicted there. One's Henry Kissinger. He's getting pretty old. I saw him recently on some video or news where he's up into years now, but he's been a power player. And there's Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, who was founder of the Bilderbergers, where the elite meet once a year to formulate whatever policy or ideas that they like to promote. And they like to try to tell you that they don't influence anything. They just kind of get together and share ideas. But let me tell you, they do influence. When these people meet, they do influence, and they intend to influence your political systems and your governments. With the founding of organizations such as the Council on Foreign Relations in this country, a part of the round table group set up by Cecil Rhodes of England, and the Bilderbergers established by Prince Bernhard of Belgium, I think it was Netherlands, I think I've got that wrong there, attempts are made to greatly influence leaders and nations. Bill Clinton and Tony Blair did not rise to positions of power before attending a Bilderberg meeting. It is also probable that the elite attempt to influence and or fix elections to suit their purposes. Let that one sink in for a minute. Did you ever think that there might be an attempt to influence and fix elections? Notice this admission by David Rockefeller in his book, Memoirs. He says, some even believe we, the Rockefeller family, are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty, and I am proud of it. So it's a mission. I mean, you can go check that out for yourself. It's in his book, Memoirs, David Rockefeller. He's proud of what he's doing, but he's not working in the best interests of the country that he is a citizen of, because he doesn't consider himself a citizen of this country. He considers himself a world citizen. If we accept the idea that there are wealthy elite that desire to forge a new world of their own, what would that world look like? So let's briefly consider one group, which is named the Fabians. Have you ever heard of the Fabians? Have you ever heard of the London School of Economics? They are pretty much promoting what is called Fabian economics. It's carefully disguised socialism is what Fabianism is. Now, the Fabians originally were an elite group of intellectuals who formed a semi-secret society for the purpose of bringing socialism to the world. Whereas communists wanted to establish socialism quickly through violence and revolution, the Fabians preferred to do it slowly through propaganda and legislation. The word socialism was not to be used. Instead, they would speak of benefits for the people, such as welfare, medical care, higher wages, and better working conditions. In this way, they planned to accomplish their objective without bloodshed and even without serious opposition. So isn't that what our government is trying to do for us today? And this comes right out of the London School of Economics. This is what the Fabians espouse. And look at what they have put. Here's a stained glass window that is or was, and I'm not sure yet whether it still is. It is in the Beatrice Webb House in Surrey, England, former headquarters of the Fabian Society. I think it's been moved, this picture, but the Fabian window, take a good look at that. It shows Sidney Webb and George Bernard Shaw striking a round globe there, trying to mold it to their ideas, their way of thinking, and what have you. And notice that there is a shield that is pictured just above this globe, and that picture is of a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that's the emblem of the Fabian Society. A wolf in sheep's clothing. Interesting. So they're almost mocking the people that they're spreading this kind of socialism for. They're very sneaky. Now notice this. There's a picture of a Fabian turtle, and it says, "When I strike hard." That's one of their emblems as well. And notice a couple of guys there. One of them you'll surely recognize. And the idea is they work slowly. So it says, we're talking about Tony Blair and Edward Miliband sitting there. And Fabian's, Edward Miliband, and Tony Blair received favorable treatment from Fabian Socialist. The London School of Economics is Fabian socialism. Would you be interested to realize that David Rockefeller, who I talked about earlier, attended the London School of Economics? So these monopoly capitalists seem to be embracing something that you might think would be contrary to their belief system. They seem to be embracing a form of socialism. So here you go now. The Bilderbergs are meeting. This is the newspaper article, the headlines, Ottawa. It's an Ottawa, Canada newspaper. It says, world's elite slip into town for secret meeting. So it is a secret meeting. Newspapers are telling you it's a secret meeting. So all these there's Queen Beatrice there and David Rockefeller, I think there is pictured there. It's hard for me to see that, okay? But anyway, they're at the secret Bilderberg meeting, and I thought these guys were just talking, sharing ideas. But I believe they are formulating agendas for the world. The New World Order. Revelation 19:15 says, and out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he should rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. And Revelation 21:1 says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God, out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Now, the Bible to these people is something called the Humanist Manifesto, and pictured here, actually there's I'm not sure whether there's a newer one on the market right now, but it started out in 1933 with the Humanist Manifesto 1, signed on by all the various movers and shakers in the educational world and the political world and what have you, signed on to this Humanist Manifesto. And the Humanist Manifesto in 1973 was called the Humanist Manifesto 2, and it describes the humanist goal of a world government as follows. Now, keep in mind, if they're going to go through all of the trouble of putting together what they believe in a booklet like this and having people sign on to it and agree that this is the goals that we should seek, don't you think that they would be implementing this somehow? It's your school systems is where they're implementing their agenda. Now, in the Humanist Manifesto 2, it says this about government. We deplore, they say, the division of humankind on nationalistic grounds. So they don't want nations. Remember that God divided the nations after the Tower of Babel into various nations and tongues and people. Okay, that was God's division. And we have reached a turning point, they go on to say, in human history where the best option is to transcend the limits of national sovereignty. They said this back in 1973. And to move toward building a world community in which all sectors of the human family can participate. Thus, we look to the development of a system of world law and a world order based upon transnational federal government. I'll translate that for you. One world government. The first 8 chapters of Daniel outline the succession of world empires from Babylon to the second coming of Christ. Daniel saw that the fourth empire, Rome, would be revived in the end times, but would eventually be destroyed at Christ's return. It is this revived Roman Empire that the world is attempting to build in defiance to God, just as Nimrod built his tower. Now, in fact, the European Union is clothing itself in the symbols of this end times prophecy of Daniel and Revelation. The world is preparing itself for the new world order of the beast, the Antichrist. Nimrod's ambition was world empire, and you can take a look at that in Genesis chapter 10, verse 8, through Genesis 11, verse 9. Today we are assembling the nations again in humanistic defiance to God. First, the world political system is unifying through the United Nations, one world government. Second, with UN assistance, the leaders of the various religions are attempting to unify the major religions of the world, one world religion. The Parliament of World Religions met in Melbourne, Australia from 3 to 9 December 2009 in order to harmonize all religions of the world. Now, this is not the first time that these people have met. Now, this Parliament of World Religions is exactly what it sounds like. It includes Protestants, Catholics, Hindus, shamans, you name it, they're all there, and they're all promoting a one world religion, and this occurred twice before. There's one in December of 2009. The other two was 1893 and 1993, where they all met together and to promote this. So the world is trying to promote a one world government and a one world religion. Without the one world religion, it is very difficult to rule the world under a one world system. So they need to bring the religion along with the idea of globalization. So thirdly, the world's money powers are attempting to remake the world's economic systems for a global economy. That's what you see going on today. They need to create the global economy. Now, fourthly, the world's intellectual establishment is attempting to mold the minds of the world's citizens into a global allegiance with anti-nationalism and globalism, etc. Together, these are termed the New World Order. That's what the New World Order is all about. Remember, to love one's country is certainly admirable, but to worship it is idolatry. Don't worship any country, because as we started a week ago, in our lesson a week ago, we talked about the idea that Satan had usurped the dominion of the world systems from Adam in the Garden of Eden. And we saw that he offered the kingdoms to Christ if Christ would only worship Satan. So Don't think for a minute that there is a single country in the world that's exempt from that type of dominion. So our commission is to witness to individuals for the saving of souls, not to become dominionist. We do not have to go and reform our government into a Christian government. It is what it is, and the Bible is clear what it's going to be. Had the church concentrated on reaching individuals, then perhaps the government would have not strayed from the principles we hold so dear. I read my Bible and find that we are going to go to this one world government. That's what the Bible is clear about. Going back, I don't believe, is an option. We need to press forward and realize where we're going and where our government and the governments of the world are taking us. Now, we should love our country enough to resist the manipulation of our minds by propaganda, resulting in acquiescence of loss of liberty and sovereignty. So, the Bible says to renew your minds. Guard your minds. Refuse to be manipulated by this secular world that we're living in. We can warn people while witnessing for Jesus. Remember, the goal of the world planners is to shift loyalty from a national to a global government. That's the goal of world planners. Shift loyalty from a national to a global government. It is happening before your eyes today. The party, Republican or Democrat, does not save us, nor do they represent us. The party is self-serving. Be wary of candidates supported by the party. They are most likely tightly controlled. Worldwide economic power. Luke chapter 16, verse 13. No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Now, the Trilateral Commission is an organization founded by David Rockefeller. There's the emblem of the Trilateral Commission from their website. So you can see that it's a very real organization. David Rockefeller is up to his eyebrows in this New World Order. Senator Barry M. Goldwater, in his book With No Apologies, wrote this. Now, Barry Goldwater was a presidential candidate running against Lyndon Johnson in the 1964 election, lost to Johnson. But anyway, he was a senator for many years from the great state of Arizona. What the trilaterals, he said in his book, what the trilaterals truly intend is the creation of a worldwide economic power superior to the political government of the nation states involved. As managers and creators of the system, they will rule the world. Now, I think you can still buy his book, With No Apologies, on the internet. I don't know if it's currently in production, but probably you can find a used copy through Amazon or someplace else. But anyway, Barry Goldwater was calling out and saying exactly what was happening. Now, in the same book, Senator Goldwater went on. He says, in my view, the Trilateral Commission represents a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the four centers of power: political, monetary, intellectual, and ecclesiastical. He is referring to control of government, political, banking, money, education, intellectual, and religion, ecclesiastical. He said that these power people want to control that. That's why many of the wealthy contribute to universities and schools, as they want to control what is being taught. Europe has been reassembled into the European Union, EU, with the passage of the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, together with the formation of the WTO, World Trade Organization, and World Court. Two legs, European and American, of this world unity are coming into place. They are diligently working to bring Asia into sync, including the Middle East. A recent push to set up an American-style EU, North American Union, NAU, is the next step in creating one governing body for the Americas. That's on the agenda, by the way. Progressively, our leaders are pushing towards the ultimate prize of unifying the Americas into an EU-type union with the inherent loss of national sovereignty. The world presently is divided into 10 economic regions, of which Europe and North America are 2 of the 10 regions. Most of this is already in place. We haven't progressed past the free trade agreement stage to advance to a European-type union, North American Union, which would merge Mexico at least, probably Central America as well, together with the United States and Canada into what is called a North American Union. That's coming. That's on their agenda. World government is ultimately the goal when at last all regions of the world are unified. Through the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, the U.S. joined with Mexico and Canada in an embryonic political and economic union. The Central American Free Trade Agreement, CAFTA, is the next stage in the plot to integrate the hemisphere. CAFTA, a forerunner of an EU of the Americas, trades away American jobs in the name of rewarding Latin American democracies. The goal of the Americas is that all currency is to achieve parity. In other words, a dollar, or whatever they might call it, the Amero, the dollar and the Canadian dollar and the Mexican peso should all be of the same value. How would they do that? It means they have to either crash economies or they have to bring up other economies. Now, sending manufacturing jobs into Mexico is supposed to accomplish some of this. So the Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, allowed companies or corporations in the United States to send their manufacturing corporations elsewhere. Some went to Mexico, many of them that went to China. So the goal in the Americas is that all currency is to achieve parity. In order to accomplish this, the various national economies need to be equalized through unequal trade agreements such as NAFTA, CAFTA. How can equalization be accomplished? The Japanese and the American European economies must be lowered or crashed to equalize with the least affluent economies. The standard of living in all nations must be equalized in order to meld the nations into a superstate, New World Order, one world government. NAFTA opened the door for corporations to abandon manufacturing on U.S. soil, encouraging corporations to seek cheap labor beyond our borders. In some cases, slave labor. That's been documented in China. The ultimate goal is that cost of labor is to be equalized in all regions. People are considered expendable labor resources by the corporations and the elite. For example, human resources as opposed to the older concept of personnel. I'm old enough to remember when we had personnel departments. And suddenly it became human resources, as if we were expendable. Worldwide political power achieving the ancient plan. Plato's tyrant. This is a picture of Plato here. As soon as he, a tyrant, disposes of his enemies, this is what Plato says, as soon as a tyrant disposes of his enemies without the city, coming to a compromise with some and killing others, and when he is no longer troubled by them, then I fancy he begins to stir up one after another in order to keep the public in need of a general or leader. That's Plato in his book, The Republic. If you notice what's going on in the world, there are sides, there's divisions, there's people that are opposed to people of different color, there's people that's opposed to people of different kind of thoughts and what have you. So in order to maintain control, these people are pitted against each other so that the government pretty much can do what they want, make whatever rules they want, and they can justify it by saying they're keeping order or what have you. Notice that the government used the instance of the World Trade Centers to institute what is called the Patriot Act, which is basically a loss of freedoms to us, the American people. And we went right along with it because what happened at 9/11? We thought the government was protecting us, but they jumped right in and they took freedoms away from us. So now you have to go through all sorts of things to get on airplanes and what have you. Not to say that all of that is unnecessary, but they certainly started rewriting the laws when they had the opportunity to do so. Now, Freemasons of the 33rd degree are told that the three assassins are law, poverty, and religion. Now I know in the Master Mason's degree, which is the third degree, they're told about the three assassins that kill the Master Mason, Hiram Abiff. And now, finally, in the 33rd degree, we're told who these assassins are. They are law, property, and religion. Edith Starr Miller records this part of the 33rd degree in her 1933 book, Occult Theocracy. She says, or she writes, she quotes, "A law, because it is not in harmony with the rights of the individual man and the duties of social man in society, rights which belong to all, property, because the earth belongs to nobody, and it belongs to all in proportion as they are required by each for the needs of his own well-being. Religion, because religions are but philosophies evolved by men and genius and adopted by the people in the belief that they would increase their well-being." Of these three infamous enemies, it is on religion that we must concentrate our most deadly attacks, because once religion is dead, law and property will fall to our mercy, and we shall be able to regenerate society by founding on the corpses of the assassins of man, Masonic religion, Masonic law, and Masonic property. So this is what. Now the 33rd degree is only by invitation only, and usually you're not going to be invited to advance to the 33rd degree unless you're very important to the Masonic ideals and what they believe. So the agenda that the world is following is Luciferian. The agenda that the world is following is Luciferian. Paul McGuire, using Saul Alinsky as an example, writes that the chaos that will spawn the New World Order will be planned as follows, according to Paul McGuire. Then everywhere, the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered at the same time. That's Paul McGuire in his book, A Prophecy of the Future of America. Now, he referenced Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky was born in 1909. He died in 1972, and he was I would say, mentor of Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama. They follow him. He wrote a book called Rules for Radicals. In that book, he said Christianity is beyond the experience of a Christian professing but not practicing population. You have to practice what you believe. You've got to practice what is in the Scripture. You have to practice what Jesus taught in the Gospels. You have to practice what is in the epistles. You have to follow your faith. Otherwise, you're falling right into their plan. And this is exactly what Saul Alinsky described. This is how he described Christians. Christian professing but not practicing population. An indictment on our Christianity in this country today. Today we hear more and more that in order to achieve world peace, all nations must become democracies. This is another name for achieving a political new world order where the entire world can be as one, just like Nimrod's scheme. To accomplish the New World Order, Americans will be asked to relinquish sovereignty, probably very slowly so we won't notice. Europeans rejected a constitution in 2005 because of this issue. This may well be accomplished by the decay of our culture. This as well may be a managed crisis designed to accomplish a pre-planned goal. More about this in the next lesson. Now, the death of nations. Luke chapter 11, verse 32, the men of Nineveh shall rise up in the judgment with this generation and shall condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonas, and behold, a greater than Jonas is here. This nation is not rising up and condemning the abominations that are filling our system and much of our religious practices in this country. Lately, the symbol of a phoenix rising from the ashes has been on display at various entertainment events. We're not even condemning that. I guarantee, this is Super Bowl Sunday, I guarantee that you're going to see some more of it at halftime on the Super Bowl. So lately, the symbol of phoenix rising from the ashes has been on display at various entertainment events. It seems that the message that is being sent is that nations need to fall in order to create a new order. Before nations fall, the culture declines. Jim Nelson Black, in his book, when nations die, gives 10 warning signs of a culture in crisis. Now, you'll notice that most of these warning signs have resulted from policies and worldview changes created by media influence, educational policy, legislation, and/or presidential influence or decrees. Social symptoms of a death of a nation. First social symptoms is a general increase in lawlessness. Now, the second is the loss of economic discipline and self-restraint. Thirdly, rising bureaucracy, government regulation, and taxes. And fourthly, a decline in the quality and relevance of education. The cultural factors that point to the death of a nation is a weakening of the foundational principles that contributed to the greatness of the nation, a loss of respect for established religions, an increase in materialism. So there's 3 items there that we consider the cultural factors in the death of a nation. Certainly, so far, all of these point squarely to the condition of the country we now live in. Spiritual indicators, there's 3 of those. A rise in immorality, I should say. Secondly, the lure of alien gods. And thirdly, the decline in the value of human life. All of these have been fulfilled in this nation. So all of these factors that Jim Nelson Black has indicated as contributing to the death of nations are being fulfilled as we speak. I think the only thing that we haven't had is the funeral. According to Jim Nelson Black, these 10 symptoms of cultural dysfunction are unmistakable signs of decay that may be discovered in great societies from antiquity to the present. Symptoms that in sufficient combination indicate the impending demise of any culture. A new world order may be seen as the answer to man's problems. Europeans are faced with the death of their nation states and the inherent loss of sovereignty in the forming of the European Union. The United States is faced with the same thing with the continuation of agreements such as NAFTA and CAFTA. These are all events that are leading to the final one world political system. That this is so may be seen in the symbols with which Europe chooses to clothe itself. The European Union has clothed itself in the prophetic biblical symbols since its beginning. 3 symbols in particular are featured. And number 1, the whore of Babylon on the beast, representing Revelation 17, found on euro coins, stamps, and government statues. Secondly, the 12 stars of the woman of Revelation 12 is found on the European flag, and it's admitted by the designer of the flag that this is so. And the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11, found on posters, and the design of an unfinished tower of the European Parliament building at Strasbourg in France. And here's a montage of what is depicted there. You have a woman riding the beast, you have the 12 stars on the European flag, and you have, notice this in this poster, European poster. It says Europe, many tongues, one voice. You'll notice that there are square or box-headed people, but there's a round-headed baby, indicating that the baby has not been conformed yet to their system. And notice also the stars. I presented this in an earlier lesson, not in this particular lesson, but a prior one. I presented this poster there, but I didn't mention the stars. But notice the bafflement indication there in that central part of the montage, and the stars are facing down as the bafflement is. I'll let you draw your own conclusion as to what that means. Now, all these symbols point to end-time events, while the tower points to man's wicked rebellion. There is no longer a doubt that nations are forging a new world order that involves a managed global system. This appears as a conspiracy centuries in the making that has evolved through the aspirations of secret societies such as the Freemasons. Now, here is 33rd degree Freemason Manly P. Hall. Remember, I told you, unless you're very important to Freemasonry, you're not going to be a 33rd degree Mason. It's by invitation only. 33rd degree Freemason Manly P. Hall, a well-respected Masonic historian, has outlined such a plan in his book, The Secret Destiny of America. There's a symbol of the 33rd degree, and there's a copy of his book there depicted, and there's Manly P. Hall. According to Hall, he says, this is quoting in his book, The Secret Destiny of America, he says, in Egypt, Greece, India, and China, the state mysteries came into existence. Orders of initiated priest-philosophers were formed as a sovereign body to instruct, advise, and direct rulers of the states. Thousands of years ago in Egypt, these mystical orders were aware of the existence of the Western Hemisphere and the great continent which we call America. The bold resolution was reached that this Western continent would become the site of the philosophic empire, according to Manly P. Hall. And he goes on to say, one of the most ancient of man's constructive ideals is the dream of a universal democracy and a cooperation of all nations and a commonwealth of states. The mechanism for the accomplishment of this idea was set in motion in the ancient temples of Greece, Egypt, and India. It will continue to function until the great work is accomplished. Manly Hall spoke of those that were capable of rule as opposed to the general masses. So Manly Hall believes, as do many of your leaders believe, that there are people that are capable of ruling, while most are not. He also wrote, this is Manly Hall, of an enlightened democracy of wise men as the goal of secret societies as follows. For more than 3,000 years, secret societies have labored to create the background of knowledge necessary to the establishment of an enlightened democracy among the nations of the world. So he's saying that these societies, these secret societies, are working towards that end. Hall is revealing the long-term goal for which secret societies labor rather than being a benign men's club, as we and members of lower levels seem to believe. We need to keep in mind that high-level secret society membership among the nation's most important leaders throughout our history appears to be the rule rather than the exception. Compare Manly Hall's enlightened democracy with the words of Mikhail Gorbachev and George W. Bush. And Hall writes of the planned destiny of America in his book, The Secret Destiny of America, indicating that knowledge existed concerning the American continents for centuries before officially discovered by Columbus in 1492. So even there, we're faced with a myth perpetrated on your school children and most of the population. We're just beginning to come to grips with this fact. Columbus was not first. There's plenty of evidence, including DNA evidence, that point to that Columbus was not first, and that many knew where America was. Managing history and controlling, I should say particularly the Chinese, because it appears on maps and descriptions dating as far back as 2200 BC in the Chinese records. Managing history and controlling knowledge has been part of the agenda to prevent the common folks from discovery that the course of the world has been managed by the wealthy elite for their benefit alone. How is that possible? Come back next week. We will discuss that next week. End of Understanding Prophecy today, Lesson 21.